Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe. Now introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Gaines, and Ed Mann.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. It's been a while and I haven't got my Yeti microphone, so I apologise for any sound quality issues, but I am joined today by the ever-present and fluorescent Ed Mann.
Oh, I love that introduction. I have missed that introduction.
Have you?
Hang on, let me just... I'm blowing the dust off the microphone.
Oh,
that was so sad, wasn't it? Oh, it seems like ages since we last caught up on the old podcast.
Really does. It must be like over a month, at least, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the summer months, I remember when we did like the stats and stuff for the, when I did the stats for the 100th episode, and I was like, the summer months are definitely where we lapse. I think, we get like the summer vibes, even though the weather hasn't been that great. It's just, you want to go out and enjoy yourself.
Well, for me, I've certainly been in the office more, which has just been a case of necessity, really. And you've been pretty busy as well.
Yeah, work's been pretty. I mean, it's nice though. It's good we got some good results. So, but it's always, it's the hard work and stuff. But it's nice when it pays off.
But we have got lots of controversial things to talk about today, so it's going to be good.
Oh yeah, it makes we are controversial kings on this podcast. Oh, dear. Do you want to crack on? Do you want to start off, mate?
Well, I was going to say, do you want to kick off with you've been ranting to me about it all morning about how you want to take down the government and install cryptocurrency as our primary currency. So why don't you tell us what you've been doing with that?
See, I'm not a government conspiracy type. Like, this is the thing, and I think we spoke about it a little bit the last time we on the show when your friends Cold Wallet and stuff, Ethereum and things like that, and I mentioned that I was getting into the tech of things like cryptocurrencies, in particular like Bitcoin. Yeah, I think the thing is you go down the rabbit hole of looking into the technologies of it, and then obviously you realise the practicality of it and why it exists. And I've been watching quite a few documentaries on it. I'm a bit late to the game. I mean, it's 2017, but it came out in 2009. The white paper did from Satoshi Nakamoto. So, it's been a while, and there's been a lot of growth, a lot of up and down and stuff. And I think when people, and particularly me, when I first heard about Bitcoin, probably about 2011, I was just like, yeah, and you kind of think of it as this kind of Ponzi schemey kind of thing, and you're like, okay, really? And you see all the YouTube videos where people are like, yeah, you can earn thousands, by trading in this thing. And I'm like, I'm not a trader. I don't really like that idea. So I've been, kind of sucked into it from the technology point of view, how kind of it works and how can you trust people without trusting people. Everyone's there for their selfish reasons, really. So that kind of got me into it. And then the documentaries and stuff that I've been watching have kind of got me more into the practicality of it, and, how to bank the unbanked and things. So, yeah, there's been a lot of interesting bits. And I know I've been preaching to you quite a bit. This morning you've been kind of talking about mining and things and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, where do you want to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said to you this morning, I really don't know anything about it. Literally, my exposure to it, as you know, and I discussed on one of the other podcasts, was some guy had lost the passphrase to his Ethereum wallet. So, I started hacking around. I started using this a quite popular tool. I think everyone uses a Python tool. Is it PythRecover or something? And as long as you've got a collection of words that you use quite often, it'll basically just run through them and quite nicely, concurrently as well. But I had nightmares because I think I was running Python 2 and it needed Python 3. And
people laugh at PHP. Can I just say, people laugh at PHP, but Python has pretty much two separate languages in their ecosystem.
I just branded it unusable, to be honest with you. I know that'll upset a lot of people, but there's no way I'm going to try and learn Python now. Not with that kind of situation. People will probably say, well, just learn Python 3, but, if they've done it once, what stops from doing it again? But I don't know. But yeah, that was my exposure to it. So I know nothing about mining. In my mind, it's just a bunch of high school kids in their garage. It
used to be. Not anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the mining part of it and how you're doing it?
I mean, so I want to preface this with, I don't know anything at all. You know, like I've only know what I know from what I've been learning the last couple of weeks, and I would be love to be proved wrong. It'd be really cool to get some people on the show who are far more technically, savvy on the blockchain, on Bitcoin, any of these cryptocurrencies, kind of, this general idea of the blockchain and how it can be used in other practical use cases. So I'll preface it with that. But yeah, so for me, really, I started off looking at it from the blockchain point of view, because you hear a lot of kind of interesting things about that and how that works, and this general ledger kind of consensus idea that you can have a distributed system where there can be essentially a one true copy, like that they work together on this thing, and one node can't essentially attack the whole network and compromise it and things like that. And so, yeah, the blockchain is this idea of a Merkle tree, which is hashed, it all hashes all the way down, where you've got blocks and it's a block hashed onto the other block. So it's it's immutable, so you can't change something in the past. Once it's happened, it's happened. So I started with that, and then obviously it goes into Bitcoin and things. But yeah, the mining, I mean, the interesting thing about it, and reading his paper and stuff, the Satoshi Nakamoto, because that's his pseudonym, so we don't actually know him. So this is quite an interesting thing about the whole story as well, is no one actually knows who made Bitcoin or came up with it. There's been lots of different, there's this thing called Cypherpunks, who have been generating a lot of these things, trying to hide from the government and, want to live in a world where they're not being tampered with and stuff, which is all cool. And yeah, he came from that space, the cypherpunk world, really. He published his paper, or he or she published his paper. People think it's a Japanese person because of the name, but no one actually knows. But their English is British English, so they think, oh, maybe they're from the United Kingdom and stuff, but no one knows. And the argument is, well, how can we trust something that someone made that we don't know? And it's like, do you need to know? As long as the math is pure, like this goes with Bitcoin and with blockchain. It's like, as long as you believe in the mathematics, you can trust anyone. Like, you can trust it. You don't have to trust anyone per person. You can just trust the fact that the cryptographic, nature of it works. So for me, you kind of like going in, and I was thinking, okay, so how do you get into this thing? How does this actually work? You kind of think of it, you think, yeah, that's cool. So every one of us kind of all doing our thing, and we're like, got all these transactions that have happened, and you've got to put them in the ledger, essentially. That's kind of in the Bitcoin sense. It's a very simple blockchain use. So you put it in the ledger, and your idea, you're stamping it saying, these are the transactions that have happened. Now, if everyone just did that, it would be anarchy, because if everyone could just say, no, it's happened, that happened, you'd get all these chains. And the idea is it's the longest chain wins out. So, the longest chain in the thing that we're up to is like the truth, essentially. This kind of idea would be that we just constantly bombard and everyone's saying these transactions and they all contradict each other. So they put in something called the consensus algorithm, and they use something called proof of work. And what that does is it makes it computationally hard to add another block, or add a transaction ledger block. So it means then that people have to invest in it. So the way the difficulty works, and this is a very clever thing, is it dynamically does it based on how quick people are doing. But the idea is that obviously as CPUs and as kind of like computers get quicker and quicker and quicker, the difficulty gets harder and harder and harder. So that it's essentially comes to around to every 10 minutes a new block is generated. In the case of Bitcoin, is that you have your transactions, you have the hash of your previous node, which is a previous transaction block, and you're saying, okay, these are the transactions you want, and you have a nonce, so you have a number that you can iterate and change. And that's what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get the hash of that whole transaction block you have. And it's kind of like you have to have a certain leading amount of zeros, or it has to be a certain, mathematically below a certain number. And what that does then is when you publish that, and the idea is there's the consensus where it's like, if the first person who ever publishes that will take it, we're like, yep, you won, you got that, you beat us to the punch there. And that then stamps and it goes in, and they start on the next one. That used to be very easy to do. I mean, you could do it on your laptop. So in 2010, you could probably, still in your early 2010, you could have just your laptop running and you could be mining. And what that would do is you would be working with everyone else, trying to compete to get the next block. And the incentive for doing that is you get Bitcoin. And that's the mining kind of aspect of it. Like, the idea of gold and things is, you're mining essentially to find something. So that's how the ecosystem works, is that's how Bitcoin comes into the system, is that through mining, money is generated. Over time, it's slowly slashing down, because now we're at 12.5 Bitcoins per mined block. It'll eventually go down until I think it's like 2,140 or something is when the last Bitcoin block, Bitcoin will be mined. And that'd be like up to 21 million, I think. So yeah, there's a finite amount of Bitcoin as well. That's another mathematical thing about it, but it goes in, that's how they get money. Now, one thing that gets me, you kind of think of the environment. So obviously this is all very good. Like, we've got this distributed way, anyone can go into it, but the environmentally damaging part of it, because essentially it used to be, say, your laptop, but now You have mining farms, mining rigs, people in countries like China that have cheaper electrical means, being able to easier space to rent, and then also how much money they can pay, how cheap it is for electricity to the places and stuff. All this factors in because you're essentially doing these massive computations, thousands, trillion. I mean, like they're onto Peta-hashes. This idea, how many hashes a second can we do? And the network is stupidly powerful. It's probably the biggest supercomputer going at this time. Is the Bitcoin mining network, and it's ridiculous. Like the amount of work you're churning out to not get anything, because a lot of them don't get anything, but you've now used all that electricity up and stuff. So the idea of proof of work, there is another one called proof of ownership, I think it is, and I'm not too sure about that one. I have to look into it. I think that's what Ethereum's going to move over to eventually, but the proof of work is the one at the moment where it's like, we'll make it computationally hard for someone to try and disrupt the network, and you have to be very, it's almost impossible to cheat the system. And that's me just yabbing on about it.
Nice. It is really interesting, actually. Yeah. I mean, I'd actually like to speak about the supercomputing part of it at some point. But sounds like that's been keeping you busy.
It has. I wanted the technology part, looking into that, then looking into kind of, this is interesting. I mean, there's been a massive spike at the moment. Bitcoin in particular, they had a hard fork. So what essentially happened was... So you've got the network and you've got this, everyone agrees that the longest route wins, the longest transaction chain wins. So, that's the idea. And over time, and then this is kind of like very much like a legacy system kind of problem. So you have a system that you've been running for a certain amount of years, and now you want to change it. You want to, they found there was an optimization called segregated witness, SegWit they called it. And it was this idea of being able to change the blocks in such a way that makes it better and far more. I think it's easier to compute. It's far more efficient. Now, some people don't really want to do that. Now, I mean, this is the hardest thing. Like, you've got this distributed bit of software, and you've got to somehow get everyone on board, as much people as board, to actually change their version of the software to meet this criteria to run it. So it's this whole legacy problem of how do we get people over to it. They've eventually got SegWit locked in. There was a lot of back and forth with the miners, because the miners obviously are they maybe have too much power, because it's like they obviously do the computation, so they decide, but they want the most money and all this, and is SegWit good for them? But they had something called a soft fork. Oh no, it wasn't a soft fork then. They've locked it in that they're going to do SegWit, which is a segregated witness. Each transaction block can be 1 megabyte. Now, as the network gets bigger and bigger, they have had this problem where it's obviously it's becoming a bit more, it's becoming slower, transaction fees are going higher because more people are using it, it's becoming more popular. So they're working on these ways of trying to speed it up, and this is one of the ones. And this one, they've agreed on. But some people didn't like that. So some people have actually done hard fork. So essentially, you can think of it like a Git, repo. It's like, I don't like the way this project's going, I'm going to hard fork you. And this is where Bitcoin Cash has come. So people have said, no, we don't want to do what you're doing. We're going to hard fork. We're not doing SegWit, and we're going to keep the whole history of the previous. So everyone's got their money still, but we're going to hard fork into another currency. And there's like an alternative currency, alt currency, called Bitcoin Cash. And they've upped the transaction block limit to 8 megabyte. So they've completely gone a different way. And it's a very weird way of thinking. Like, I can understand for kind of people who don't really understand programming or understand kind of very good if you understand Git, kind of the history model of forking and things, because you can understand and think, all right, yeah, they've got the same shared history. It's like, hang on, this money's the same history. So I've got, essentially you could say one day you've got 1 Bitcoin, and now you've got 1 Bitcoin and 1 Bitcoin Cash, and they're just split essentially. So that's happened. So there's a hard fork there, and eventually there'll be maybe they're doing the 2 meg thing, which is 2 megabyte increase to 2 megabyte, the transaction block size, and that will happen in November maybe, and that could be another hard fork. So it's a bit hard. It's a weird thing to think that this money can be split essentially. People are like, I don't like the way this is going, and it's just software. So it's like, I can run a different piece of software that would do it differently.
Mind blown.
I know. I've been reading a lot about it, watching a lot. There's a couple of documentaries that really kind of solidify this. There's the rise and rise of Bitcoin, banking on Bitcoin, the end of the money as we know it. These are 3 documentaries I highly recommend. I'll put them in the show notes. There's another one that I don't know whether... this was another thing that I've never even thought about, the dark web or the deep web, the unindexed web. And there's a documentary about Silk Road, which was a high-profile, illegal, illicit drugs and whatnot website underground, and it used Bitcoin. And that's another thing with Bitcoin. And I was one of these trying I don't want Bitcoin because it's just used by drug dealers and illegal for illicit means. But what I've learned is that people on the wrong side of the law are the ones that probably use the most recent technologies to keep up, because they're in a very competitive market that need the latest and greatest. So they obviously, it's like, they will be the first to adopt technologies and try them out. And that's why Bitcoin was used. And people have, always worried that, it's like, oh yeah, it's just full of Silk Road and all this bad stuff. But yeah, there's a documentary called The Deep Web as well, which is very interesting, which talks about like the Tor network and not, like encrypted like websites and, web services and things, and stuff that I've completely kind of just disregarded for years, and now finally thought, no, I'm going to take a look into this. And now I'm a little bit obsessed because it's very interesting stuff.
Just taking on your last point, though, about, criminals using it, criminal gangs, whatever, what is the traceability of the transactions? Because presumably that must be another appeal. If they think that it's not as traceable as standard, bank transactions or cash or whatever.
Well, this is the interesting thing about it. So it's actually very traceable. The only thing you have is that everyone can see every transaction that's happened. So I know that wallet, because a wallet, so what you do is public key encryption. So so you have your public key, which is the key that's your wallet address, so people will transfer money to that. You have your private key that you keep. Now, if you lose that private key, you're buggered. Anyone can get your money, but you then have to sign with your private key that I, sign saying that, yeah, I allow that person this transfer of this money to this account and stuff like that. So the public keys are all accessible.
But do I know that transaction occurred with Edman, or do I just know that your ID?
Yeah, so you just know from the public key. So all these public keys are happening, but what happens though is that obviously in the Bitcoin world, like so this has happened obviously with the WannaCry thing. So they use Bitcoin, and people have been able to tally how much money that they've earned with the Bitcoin, how much Bitcoin they've been able to get from their thing they did. But the minute they try and convert it to fiat currency back to, maybe real money in quotes, or want to use it, they've got traceability on it. Now, if they try and purchase a product from it, well, you can go back and say, okay, well, tell me where they put, what was the address that they posted the product to, because you've got the money trace. And it's like, if they try and convert that Bitcoin into, say, fiat currency, they're like, okay, what bank account did they transfer it to? So there isn't actually an easy way of kind of hiding it. I mean, I'm sure there may be some technical ways of laundering it, but you can trace money throughout the system. And what scares me, what's interesting about it is like, so if I gave you my Bitcoin wallet address, my public wallet address, you could work out how much money I have in that wallet, which is a very weird thing of thinking. Now, I know you can probably split the wallets and you say, oh, okay, I have a little money in that, little money in that, but people can just work that out down the chain and stuff. So you are opening up how much money you have. But it's the way it has to work that, we all have to know. I mean, this is what makes distributed, that you're trusting now the network and the encryption in it and the cryptography ciphers and whatnot.
I have so many questions on this, but I'm probably best off reading about it. But in part of my mind, I'm thinking, because you can buy physical things now with Bitcoin, for example, right? You can go to your corner shop, you could buy a Mars bar with Bitcoin, right? And in a sense, does that not then, say, devalue the pound? Because the shop has bought that product with hard, sterling currency. They've then sold it, taking in Bitcoin. That must have an effect on the economy, surely.
I think it does. Well, I mean, so this is kind of one of the things that has happened the last month. So, for its whole life, Bitcoin has been very volatile. It's a speculative investment, they call it. And at the moment, it's rised ridiculously. So, you could buy Bitcoin for ridiculously cheap money, like couple of pennies or so for a Bitcoin. Now each Bitcoin is worth £3,300 at this time of recording. £3,300 per Bitcoin. Now that's absolutely insane. So it's a speculative thing where everyone's thinking, oh, this is the next thing. And I do believe, like, this is one thing, I believe in the technology. I do believe the cryptocurrencies are going to win. I don't know whether Bitcoin will or one of the other currencies, but I do believe that this is going to do something, and it is changing the way we're thinking. And even if it helps, we're very lucky living in like countries that we do, where we have banks that work, where, well, you could say that they work, but, we're lucky we can actually be banked and stuff. Whereas in some countries they can't. It's crazy. I mean, I was reading something like in Kenya, I think it is, that they trade mobile minutes or something. They use mobile minutes on their mobiles as like transferring those as a source of currency, which just bamboozles me. It's just like, that's a better form of currency than, like, say, the government instantiated currency or something. Yeah, I'm gonna have to put. I'll try and find some things on that if I'm not talking absolute rubbish. But I'm pretty sure that's something that has happened, and Yeah, it just bamboozles me. But you're right, though. It does devalue fiat currencies, because people obviously are going to start adopting this. And there's like a very interesting person in this space called, I think, Andreas Anatopoulos. I'm sorry if I butchered his name, but he's done like a couple of books, Mastering Bitcoin, which is a very developer-centric one. Definitely, if you're into the tech, that's something to look into. And another book that I'm just about to read is The Internet of Money, and that's kind of more about his like essays and discussions and stuff, because he does a lot of, he essentially goes around the world discussing this. He's from a Greek background, so his family are from Greece, so they obviously have had those problems, and so he's dealt with it firsthand. But he's very clever and very articulate on what he says on these things.
I was going to say, in your mind then, you could see a time when all kind of like national currencies would crumble and cryptocurrency would take over, and you'd have more of a global, in the same way that the dollar, I guess, is kind of a global currency at the moment.
You see, this is the thing. This is where it gets into like, our government, I think for me, even if it helps people who can't get bank accounts, there's certain, countries where you just can't get a bank account, or it's very hard to do things. These are perfect for them, for that kind of means. And I do believe that it's going to be like digital gold, that it is a form of currency, a form of value. And the way it works is what are you believing in? Are you believing in the government? Are you believing in a system, of trust with people? Or are you believing in math? And I think that's the transfer. It's like, do you believe in mathematics and the cryptographic nature of it, as opposed to in people? And I think that's where it's kind of come to. This Andreas guy, so he goes around the whole world discussing it, and he prefers being paid in Bitcoin, and he will use Bitcoin, and he will only transfer from Bitcoin into the fiat currencies that he needs in that country for, certain bits, so he'll go to America and he'll transfer some of his Bitcoin into fiat currency, into, US dollars, but his wealth and his kind of savings are in Bitcoin. And I admire people like that. It's a very scary world to be in. Like, I still don't think you should jump right in. Like, it's not something that I'm very cautious on all these things. So, but for me, the technology is fascinating, and like its applications and stuff. And, you were talking about Ethereum, which is a whole different ball game. That's, the idea that you can run essentially it's a supercomputer virtual machine on the network, and essentially all computers share this distributed ledger, and you can have autonomous programs running on this supercomputer that you pay gas. Essentially that's how the Ethereum or Ether is, to run these programs, and you can have these decentralized applications that are just being run by everyone around the globe, and a distributed storage of them, so can't be compromised. It's just fascinating.
It really is. Can I ask a personal question then?
Hit me.
Like, how much money have you made since you started?
Nothing. In fact, I've actually lost money, I think. I'm not going to do like that whole, you should invest loads in Bitcoin and stuff. I hope people have, and I'm sure people have found a lot of money out of it. I'm not looking into it to think, you could get a load of fiat currency out of it or money. For me, it's kind of like, I think what I did actually was quite funny. So I did look at some YouTube videos. Like, I didn't realize how much money I think people get off making YouTube videos and vlogs and stuff on YouTube. It's like a whole different world. Listening to what they were watching, what they were doing, they were talking about trading and stuff. I'm like, this is cool. I'll go on Kraken. This is like a trading thing. And I was like, I ain't got a clue what I'm doing. So I put £20 worth of Bitcoin in, and I think I got one, what is it called? I forgot what it's called. I got one Dash, coin of Dash or something. This is another cryptocurrency, and one Monero. And these are all different cryptocurrencies. These are all currencies that are kind of, they all have different needs and they solve different problems. So Monero is this idea of, the problem with Bitcoin is that, it's not anonymous. Well, Monero is anonymous. Somehow it's able to get around that whole thing, and it's very, hidden and stuff. So, but yeah, so I lost I lost 20 quid really, because what I've and nothing, but it was just interesting and fun to like do some trading. Amy looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, what a waste of time. I'm like, this is the future, man. And like, and like, this is awesome. I'm a trader. And I'm like, yeah, no, I couldn't do any of that. That just sounds scary, but it is so interesting. That's what I would say. Like, look at the tech. And also, one of the things you could think is, like me, you're like, this is cool. Well, why don't I do some mining then? Naively, I thought, I could mine some alt currencies maybe, and I could just make money, because essentially it's like, I've got a fast issue. I've just built a server, it's fine. It's got like a, latest i5 processor. It's got to be all right, isn't it? And then you realise, and I ragged my computer, my poor CPU. So CPU mining is pretty weak as it is anyway. It's pointless doing it now. It's all about GPUs, and then they've got these ASICs, which are the hardware-based mining platforms. And I was doing CPU mining for a day, and I earned a solid, on mining different altcoins, I earned a solid 5 cents.
Sorry, for the people who can't see our instant message channel, Ed has just put he made £80,000 in a week. So,
you know what? For more listeners and stuff, we should put stuff like that in. Like these are this is what the get rich quick schemes is like the best way of getting followers and stuff. So yeah, I earned like loads. It wasn't 5 cents. Now I don't want to know how much I spent really on power and also my poor CPU's like health on doing that. So it was complete waste. So, people, to mine is very much like you have to have loads of GPUs, and there's been all this thing, obviously, where a lot of AMD GPUs, graphics cards have been kind of sold up by crypto miners because they're like, yeah, this is a great card for it. And it's all based on where the latest money is. Like Ethereum at the moment, you can't do hardware mining on it, so you have to do GPU mining. It's got a bit of memory intensive use to it, so people buy up loads of GPUs. And look, I mean, one thing actually, it would be awesome to get like a proper miner on the show who does the mining, because their rigs are insane. Like they have racks and racks and racks of GPUs just going.
With the GPU, then you'd be talking. You could have hundreds of cores on those.
They are, I mean, because a graphics card, the beautiful thing about a graphics card is it is made for one job, and that is pretty much number crunching. And you need number crunching. You're doing random numbers. So, GPUs are just insane for that. And then you raid them all, you SLI them or whatever you do, and you have loads of them and you just go to town. But thing is like the competition is not just you need one of them, like you need 10, 15. And even then, if you're in a country where, electricity is a lot of money, you probably are going to be taking out more money. And there's this whole kind of thing. If you go on Reddit and stuff, you learn like people do the calculations of how much it costs for electricity to how much, they can actually mine and what profit they get. And they won't get that much profit really, because the main miners now are in China and all these other places. It's pretty crazy. Kind of, it's become a big, big, big business.
Wow. Okay. And so you would, if you had like multiple GPUs, you would network them the same way that you would like do a Pi cluster. I can't remember what the program is you use for the Pi cluster, but you just have one program that will connect them all? Yeah,
so they have GPU miner software that you can say, okay, you can use these cores and, these GPUs to mine, and it will just do the work for you. I mean, to be honest, mining isn't that hard, like, to set up. Like, you can get CPU mining and GPU mining very easy. And then you have things called they have, like miner pools, mine pooling. So essentially you're pooling together your resources with other miners so that you have a better chance of getting something out of it. So you're not doing it on your own, you're doing it with other people. And, the idea is that, obviously if you solve it, other people get some money of yours, but you get more of a stable income out of it. I mean, some people probably still are earning enough money to live off by just mining.
That's crazy, yeah.
It's mental. But for me, it's too volatile and it's too scary. For me, it's the technology and kind of what it could be. And I really think it's interesting. And there was a very good TED talk, actually. I think his name was Richie something, and it was the blockchain massively simplified. And it was just talking about like how this is like the internet revolutionized things, and now it's blockchain, and now it's the Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are revolutionizing things. And I can see that turn, and obviously the money invested in it. I mean, there is going to be a bubble in quotes where it will pop, but I don't know when. But it's crazy to think we're up to £3,300 per Bitcoin, which just bamboozles me when people would just chuck them around. Like, I think someone in 2010 transferred 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza or something. Someone bought it was crazy, right? So someone in America transferred 10,000 Bitcoin to someone in England who then bought them a pizza. So that was like the first official Bitcoin transaction.
Oh, wow.
Just bamboozles me. 10,000 Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be new millionaires out of this. I'm sure there are already if you've just got out and something. But people jump out, at wrong times, and you do this thing called hodling, which is hold on for dear life, which is just you just stay in it. But yeah, it's an interesting space. I mean, with me, I'm very much kind of like get interested in something, so I read up loads about it, and then I move on to the next thing. But this, it's nice just to kind of, say these two books from Andreas and these talks and stuff I put in the show notes, and these documentaries, highly recommend. Just opens your eyes up to certain things. And for me, I was so I just never really thought too much about cryptocurrencies as anything. I just thought it was a load of rubbish, really. And it's really, just me, it's the technologies behind it. So that's enough about me, like, yabbing on. So what have you been up to, man?
Okay, so you'd think, like, being all this time between when we did the last podcast, I'd have loads to talk about. But I don't know if I have, really. I mean, I've been continuing reading that ES6 book, which is really good, really interesting. And I've sort of broken away from the React Create class type way of doing things, and I'm making classes the right way, forcing myself to do that now. And
didn't you mention to me, it was so funny when you said, like, we've got classes and stuff in JavaScript, but they aren't classes. And it's like, yep, they're just, it's just syntactic sugar on prototypical inheritance. Like, that's all they've done, is just done the transpiling for you.
Exactly. When I sort of read that in the book, I couldn't believe it, but, fair enough. So, yeah, I've been reading that, and then I guess I don't know, it's in my nature, I always want to rebel against things that have a bit of a buzz to them. And obviously, I think I was driving you mad on WhatsApp talking about Agile. And, I worked somewhere that said we do Agile. And I was like, I mean, I had nothing to quantify it against saying whether we did or didn't. I'd never read about it or anything like that. And if we did do it, I'm pretty sure we did it horrendously wrong, because it didn't really do any good and we were always late on our projects. So, yeah, so I started reading. I bought a book about Scrum from, is it Jeff Sutherland? Who obviously was one of the guys who signed the original Agile Manifesto and all the rest. And to be honest, I am really enjoying the book, but it's obviously very kind of typical one of these books where he's like an evangelist of Agile, so he tells you about these great case studies of where Agile, really helped turn companies around and all the rest. And it is good, and there is stuff I'm definitely going to take away from it, but I still have some sort of things that I feel quite negative about it, in the sense that one of the examples I said to you before the show was like, for example, if I went into an interview and said, no, I don't do Agile, or I don't do Agile, would I then be, I bet any money that I'd have a lesser chance of getting that job, especially if that company practiced Agile. And people say, well, of course you would, because they, look for someone who fits. And my counter argument, I guess, would be, well, yeah, but you also need people to challenge the way that you think. And I don't know, in my mind, like, I see so many companies now saying Agile, like, and like you said to me, you said, well, okay, criticise it, but come back to me with a better option. I was like, well, all right. I haven't done that. But, I started reading about some of them before the show, and I don't know, I would love someone to come on the show who doesn't do Agile and does something else, even if it is waterfall, because I bet there are some companies that do the waterfall method and do it really well. There must be, right? Or, alternatives. I would love to hear them, because it just, in my mind, it just seems so binary now. Like, you're either waterfall or you're Agile.
You're either wrong or you're right, aren't you? You're right or you're wrong. I think, yeah, that is true. But then Agile, like the whole concept of the Agile Manifesto and stuff was to change the way to make quicker feedback loops. But again, this is a trouble when business and stuff get into it, and recruitment and all this kind of stuff, and it becomes too corporate. And Agile's just become this buzzword for anything and everything. When you say, oh, do you do Agile? I'm like, well, we do Kanban. We have a Kanban board. That works for us. We do some pair programming. That works for us. We have, PR requests. We do small iterative loops like that. That works for us. And, I think for me, it's the value in the people that do it. So any system can work as long as it works for your system. So don't feel bad if you're doing it a certain way that other people perceive him wrong. The reason why these other systems come about is because it didn't work for certain people. I love quick feedback loops, and, like TDD is another thing that's come out of it, with this idea of quicker feedback loops and better test coverage and more confidence in your code. Now, if you can get confidence in your code other ways, great. That's fine for you then. If it works for you, it works for you. It worked for people like Kent Beck and stuff, this works better for them. And, I find, yes, it's lovely having a good test coverage, because you feel confident doing refactorings afterwards. And most of the time you're writing code, you're refactoring or changing existing code. And I can tell you, like, especially I was doing it today, like, changing code is scary, especially when it's, code that has been live and stuff and it's working. But if you've got good test coverage behind it, you have a far more confident kind of outlook on it. And you're like, yep, no, well, the test passed. I'm pretty darn confident then. And then if a problem happens, you write a test coverage for it. You write test coverage for the problem and you fix the bug. But for me, those are like Agile kind of concepts or Agile kind of tools and stuff to use. And then you've got obviously like the Scrums and things, which are, having these sprints and stuff like that, which are a certain way of doing it, because getting completely away from the idea of like this design, develop, release life cycle of the waterfall, where it's like 2 weeks, do this. Okay, another 2 weeks, do this. Another 2 weeks, do this. Again, it's what works for you for me. I don't think it's right or wrong anyway. I think it's, if it works for you, great. If it works for your team, great.
I agree, but actually my second sort of criticism would be, like when you just said there, if it works for your team, that's great. Actually, who does Agile benefit? Does it benefit the developer, or does it benefit the commercial shareholders or your clients who obviously need the project out on time and budget? And obviously, and pretty quite rightly, that the answer is the client. And you could then argue, okay, well, also the developer, because if you're delivering projects on time, it means that your agency or whatever is going to get more business and it protects your work. But actually, in my mind, I could see the potential for it to stifle the imagination of developers. So I was talking to my friend Nick about it the other day, and he was saying, well, yeah, developers have a tendency to do more than they should do, etc., etc. And he was saying that's a bad thing. And of course, it is a bad thing if you're the client or whatever. But if you're the developer and you're delivering stuff that's way beyond what was spec'd out and it's fantastic and actually gives your client a new edge, I know what I'm talking about is very controversial. I can see the naivety in a lot of what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, if all you ever deliver is the bare minimum of what you're expected, then don't expect to go and
you know what? I completely concur, man. Like, if you're delivering the MVP all the time, you're not going to change the world. And, sometimes you need to break out of it. And, this is just another rigid structure that people have provided. And like tools like Scrum and sprints, they're all very structured around, we know up front what we've got to do, boom, boom, boom. But yeah, again, for me, it's the people. That's where the value comes in. Have you got people that can change the way things work, and can they go above and beyond, or can they change things, and can they think a different way and stuff, and let them do it? If it works for them, it works for them. And I value Kanban boards and stuff. It's great to know what people are doing. It's great to prioritize work. It's great to visually see stuff and be able to work through backlogs and work out what's going on and how things are, maybe things we're kind of back on time on that, and you can see why and all that. It's just one of those tools. It works for different people. It's this be all and end all where people are like, yeah, no, it's the greatest thing. But it's like, well, it's just another tool. If it works for you, it works for you.
I think in my Marxist head, I imagine like our commercial overlords whipping us.
I can think that we're probably saying stuff so naively. And again, this is great though. If people want to come on the show and talk about it, that would be awesome. Because if they've got other insights and completely, whether it's the Bitcoin stuff I've been talking about, or whether it's the the stuff in here, we're more than happy. I love being wrong, because then I have a chance to be right. Which sounds weird, but you get a chance to learn. Then it's like, okay, I was wrong in thinking that. So,
but imagine if like Elon Musk had said, when they were building a rocket for SpaceX, just get me an MVP, and they're like, well, yeah, okay, but we're opening Windows, but it'll definitely fly. You won't be the sick person in it or whatever.
So some projects just don't work because you've got research projects and stuff, don't you? And that's the thing where you don't know. Like a lot of these plans work if you've got a very structured, this is how the project should go. And I know there are means in Agile philosophy and Scrum and all this that work out with that, that things can overlap and things can kind of go longer than they need to and stuff. But with research, you don't know, and experimentation, people shouldn't undervalue the need for experimentation and stuff, because that's how things move on.
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah.
And we still need to get your mate Nick on the show. We still need to get him on the show.
So the other thing I was going to mention was something I was listening to on Radio 4 the other day. Yes, I'm that old. I listened to Radio 4, and it was like a program about the beginning of the internet and about security and some of the lack of security and how it's hard to retrofit some security they'd like to have in now. And it was just, honestly, it was really fascinating, because they were saying like, at the beginning it was just limited to like people that they knew, and they were like, oh, okay, we'll give it to this university or whatever. I'm like, oh, those guys won't do anything bad. I know those guys. They're really, good guys. And they, just didn't envisage the kind of commercial side to it. So I'll give you the link, and then you can put it in the show notes. I think it's like a series, and there's only one episode that's been on, so I definitely recommend that. Yeah, I think that's about all I really had. Seems like every podcast I talk about, I've had some sort of speed issues with Postgres. Probably to pinpoint Postgres is a bit out of order, but I've had a few speed issues with the database, which I'd like to talk about, but I think that'd be for another show. So, did you have anything else?
I've got a couple. So with your whole talking about the internet, this brought up this very funny thing that I watched that came up on because Bitcoin, again, and like the whole cryptocurrency space is a very different world of thinking or way of thinking. And it kind of brought up thinking how people thought of the internet.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does
it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of it's a computer billboard, but it's
Right.
nationwide. And it's several universities and everything all joined together. And
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It's just great, isn't it? To kind of like think, this is what people used to think what the internet was, and trying to understand what the @ symbol is. Like the @ symbol is about, and it's all this kind of stuff. And you're like, wow. But it shows that how technology moves on and our thinking moves on, and how revolutionary ideas just take time and people can't comprehend, and they have to look at things that are already in their existence now. But this was like an outtake of a Today Show, American TV show. They were just about to do a talk on the internet, so this was like them thinking, what the hell are we talking about?
Oh, that's great.
It just makes me laugh so much. And this is what people very like about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies now, but maybe in 10 years' time they won't be. But there is actually one other thing I'd love to talk about. It's another thing I'd like to mention. Two things, actually, sorry. So one is Colin Hardy. So we had him on the show a couple of episodes back now, and he was a really interesting guest. Talking about cybersecurity, and his YouTube channel is just so invaluable for interesting looks into different cybersecurity tools and pen testing, and like kind of just discussing all these different malwares and stuff. And one of the YouTube videos he did was 5 awesome tools to perform behavioral analysis on malware, and it was very good oversight for people like me, easy to understand. And yeah, so I'd highly recommend that. Put that in the show notes. And definitely check out his YouTube channel. And another interesting gotcha that we had this week. So some of us, we're still on 5.6. We're slowly moving to 7. And with 7.1, you get microsecond precision. And microsecond precision is awesome. And to generate microsecond precision, when you're using something like 5.6, you have to do it a little bit of a hokey-pokey way. There's a couple of gotchas. But one of the interesting ones is that if you pass in, so you've got the create from format in date time. So you do date time, create from format. And you pass in saying, I'm going to do, Unix timestamp in seconds, .u, which is the microseconds. And you pass in your microseconds. You pass in your second Unix timestamp seconds and microseconds. And you also pass in the date, you pass in the time zone, obviously. Now, one thing that the PHP date create from format does is if it's a Unix timestamp, it ignores the time zone. And we got bit by this. And it's quite scary. And it is in the documentation, but it's one of those things where it's like the API isn't doing what you expect it to do. And it was quite interesting. So you have to set the time zone again after creating the date time.
Forewarned.
Forewarned indeed. And that's all it for me as well.
Best podcast ever?
Oh, easily, mate. Easy. We've done some controversial things, and I'm sure we've said a lot of things wrong on this show. So, it'd be interesting to see what we get Never. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what we get feedback-wise. But, no, it's been good getting back on the airwaves. I love saying the airwaves, like it's some old school, ham radio, kind of like, illegal pirate channel. I love it. Pirate radio. Oh, man. All right, then, dude. Well, I think it's been a great episode. Do you want to wrap this one up?
You've been listening to 3 Devs and Maybe. I'm Michael Budd, and this is Ed Mann. And that's all for today. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.